Today's rant comes to us a video from online content creator Destiny. And this brings about a huge question for me, and that is, what amount of evidence would it take to convince you of something different than you already believe? And for me, it's always just been facts and just clear evidence. Show me how what you're saying is real, and I'll sign right up with what you're saying. But if there's other evidence that disproves what you're saying, how then do you expect me to be convinced to your side that I'm then wrong because I believe evidence that you haven't presented anything against? And this is just a belief system in something we've been told instead of facts we can see. And it's going to be the thing that hurts us the most as a country, is not admitting the very problems that we have. I mean, to fix any problem, you have to admit that they exist. And this video is going to show you just unbelievably how we can't even admit that there's a cancel culture while at the same time accepting that there's a cancel culture. So let's roll into it.
I am here to debate if wokeness has gone too far or not.
Okay, my earlier undefeated conversation topic was that wokeness has obviously gone too far because I think progressives... Obviously.
Okay.
Slow down. Obviously, wokeness has gone too far because progressives are really bad at engaging other people in conversation topics. I think that there's way too much of a ideological orthodoxy that's enforced around any area that progressives get their hands on.
So it's not that you're not saying it clearly or that your ideology isn't being expressed properly. It's that you're ignoring the evidence that's presented against it.
Okay, so I'm less interested in making any sort of, I guess, positive argument. I'm just going to say that I think you're basically the one putting forward the positive argument that this has gone too far. I'm not even going to make any prescriptions as to that. I'm just going to say I think that premise is entirely false. And the biggest problem that I have with this conversation is that can you concretely define what you mean by wokeness?
Progressives have essentially created the system that allows them to get rid of all dissenting opinion because the dissenting opinions themselves represent a threat to discourse or democracy or woke values or whatever.
Okay,
that's the specific thing I'm kind of pointing at.
Okay, can you give me an example of wokeness run amok that you think is problematic, or if it were to become a broader social trend, would be some sort of social contagion?
It's the rigid enforcement of progressive values, and if there's any deviation, you get bucked by the system, or you get excised or whatever.
The term is cancel culture.
I would say that Brett Weinstein at Evergreen College was an example of this.
Can I stop you? What do you mean by bucked by the system?
So if you're in school, people will try to cancel you or get you kicked out. If you're a faculty or administrator, people ask for your resignation or make it hard for you to work. If you're a researcher, people won't want to work with you or publish your stuff, stuff like that.
Okay, so threats to livelihood is
yeah,
what
basically,
you're
yeah. Lots of cultural pressure, lots of social pressure, sometimes direct pressure from staff, but lots of social and cultural pressure.
That's literally the definition of cancel culture, and you try to downplay it and act as though it doesn't exist. That's the problem. You have to admit that that's a problem, that you can't just cancel people because they say something that you don't like.
So I think Brett Weinstein at Evergreen College was a pretty good example of that. Basically, people started to show up at his class outside. They were, I don't know if I say threatening him, but they were screaming at him, shouting at him. They really wanted to fight over him being racist and stuff like that. And eventually it blew into a thing where, I don't know if he ended up settling with the college before he left or whatever, but he basically left the college because of all the pressure.
So what you're describing to us is how he got canceled.
If you one of my biggest frustrations as an online debater content creator is people like me end up getting tasked with debating these esoteric or very difficult to navigate scientific fields, and nobody from those scientific disciplines will ever enter into any of these discussions.
They stay out of these arguments because they know they'll get shouted down and they'll get canceled. It's not okay to speak against the establishment and against what the herd believes. This is what we're seeing. The herd believes something that if you believe against it, you need to be shouted down. You need to be canceled. You need to be silenced. You need to be censored.
Look at where we're at now, okay? I'm glad you picked this topic because it illustrates my point perfectly, right?
Okay, perfect.
We've made a justification for an evolutionary biologist to not talk about evolutionary biology because it's insensitive.
No. He's free to talk about it, but I'm also free to scrutinize the implication by which, why is he demanding that this is now the time to bring it up?
Eventually, he concluded that the root of the problem was not malice, but stupidity.
Well, because people want him to have a
response to a
conversation about like
disagreement.
race and stuff, right? So wouldn't this be, if he was ever going to do it, like that would
Okay,
be?
I think it's a little bit unfair to characterize it as like, oh, people just want to have a discussion about race. Like,
That's
we're
true.
just-
They didn't want to have a discussion about race. They wanted to force white people off the campus using social pressure for
Right, and I'm
reasons.
saying I'm not even going to defend that or discuss it or whatever, but
You serious?
but
Well, then
my
what's the
only-
problem? Then what do you disagree with?
my disagreement is that that doesn't meet the threshold to say that it's gone out of control. What you just went on to describe, you know, in excessive detail.
Facts that contradict a stupid person's prejudgment simply need not be believed, and when they are irrefutable, they are just pushed aside as inconsequential, as incidental.
Well, I described it because you asked me for one example. That's one example. We go through plenty others if you want.
I
If that was
know.
the only thing, but
Okay, like I'm not even going to disagree that like you can throw these anecdotes at me all day, but they will always just be that. They will just be anecdotes.
You asked for the example. It was given to you. You can't then dismiss it. That is how children play games. They change the rules constantly. This is not a win or lose. If these conversations and these things are as big as people claim they are, then we should probably actually find out the facts behind them and not just, I win because I dismissed your argument. What are the actual facts?
Like, are we actually seeing a meaningful trend? And I mean beyond the scope of individual people having their livelihoods disrupted, losing their income or whatever. Honestly, for the most part, I would disagree, or like I would agree with you that like in each like discrete example that you're going to bring up,
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
You don't have to make laws or create policy for these things. If you just shut down a handful of dissenting voices, then the rest of the herd already knows just not to say anything. That is the exact point that's being made, the end of the conversation, the facts presented. You are overlooking them now and trying to go into a whole nother realm of conversation that has nothing to do with this. You are ignoring the facts that have now been presented. You asked for it. Here it is. You now need to change your way of thinking. Because if we don't remember the past, then we're doomed to repeat it. Thanks for hitting that like and subscribe button. Thanks to all my subscribers. Thanks to my new subscribers. Thanks for watching. Later.